What's up, guys? Today I am ranking every TDX tower. But before we start, I have a few things to say. I am just ranking the tower in general, not the paths. I will rank every tower's upgrade path in a different video. With that being said, let's get started and I hope you enjoy. The first tower is Ranger. Now for this being the starter tower, it is actually pretty good. It can solo both easy and intermediate if you know what you're doing. And because of that, it's going in B tier. Next is Shotgunner. Honestly, you're only going to use this tower until you unlock Operator. Now that doesn't mean it's a horrible tower. It is pretty good for small crowd control, but there are better options. That makes Shotgunner fall into D tier. Next is Operator. Operator is actually a pretty good tower. I know I said I'm not talking about the upgrade paths, but Operator is very unique. Being able to have stealth detection pretty early and spawn in a Humvee on the bottom path, Operator is a solid A tier. Next up is Mine Layer. Now Mine Layer can only be good if you know how to use him correctly. Mine Layer will be able to do its max DPS if you let him build up as many mines as he can. Overall, I think that Mine Layer is an interesting tower and pretty fun to use. So I think he deserves A tier alongside Operator. Next is Sniper. Now Sniper is a really good tower. Being able to have almost global map range, can stealth himself, have pierce, and have an ability to reveal stealthed enemies for 8 seconds. This makes Sniper our first S-tier tower. Next is Cryo Blaster. Cryo Blaster is a decent support type tower, being able to freeze bosses or big crowds, all at the cost of not doing that much damage. And because of that, this lands Cryo Blaster at B tier. Next is Missile Trooper. Now Missile Trooper is the best crowd control tower for starters, being able to have a javelin for extra range and more damage or an MRL for faster fire rate. Missile Trooper is in A tier. Next up is Patrol Boat. Honestly, once you unlock this tower and then use it for a while, you're just gonna forget about it. Patrol Boat also has no stealth detection at all, but overall it still has some big range and some decent damage. And because of that, I'm putting Patrol Boat in C tier. Next up is Farm. Farm is really good for making money and can even give your base more health. This lands Farm in an easy S tier. Next up is Barracks. Barracks is a spawner tower that deploys troops onto the path. It can also spawn missile troopers, rioters, and flame troopers onto the field. Having such a variety of troops, Barracks is an A-tier tower. Next up is Grenadier. Now, Grenadier might not have as much range as Missile Trooper, but has some decent splash and can also stun enemies. So I think that B tier is just the right spot for him. Next up is EDJ. EDJ is a support tower that buffs your tower's fire rate, range, and even gives discounts if you go bottom path. Overall, EDJ is an easy S tier. Next up is John. John doesn't really do that much damage until his final level, and he has an ability to buff towers damage by 50% for 8 seconds. But he is still a good tower, so he's going in A tier. Next up is Laser Gunner. Laser Gunner will be the cheapest tower that can easily help you beat harder modes like Expert. He also starts off with stealth detection as soon as you place him. Overall, Laser Gunner is going in S tier. Next up is Toxic Nader. Toxic Nader is a really good crowd control tower that shoots gas at enemies. He also can have an ability that makes enemies take plus 30% damage for 12 seconds. You can use this ability on bosses too, but they only take 10% extra damage. I'm going to put him in B tier because he can't do that much damage by himself. Next up is Armored Factory. Armored Factory is a spawner tower that spawns Humvees and on later levels tanks. Armored Factory can be a good mid to late game tower, so I'm putting it in A tier. Next up is Juggernaut. Juggernaut has very good DPS and has a lot of health as well. He is also able to get stealth detection on the bottom path. Overall, Juggernaut is an S tier tower. Next up is Railgunner. Now Railgunner is not going to be that good if you have only one Railgunner. But if you have multiple Railgunners, especially bottom path Railgunners, you can do some serious damage. Railgunner is going in S tier for its boss killer potential. Next up is Artillery. Artillery is a very good crowd control tower, but you have to manually aim it yourself. Overall, Artillery is going in B tier. Next up is Medic. Medic can heal your towers and has 2 abilities. One being able to give a certain tower God mode, and the other one makes a tower do 3 times its normal damage. Being such a good support tower, Medic is going into A tier. Next up is Slammer. Slammer is a melee tower that uses a sledgehammer to stun enemies or even stun lock if you have enough of them. And because of that, Slammer is an S tier tower. Next up is XWM Turret. XWM Turret is able to rebuild after it dies and does some amazing DPS. So XWM Turret is another easy S tier. Next up is Golden Ranger. Golden Ranger is probably the best early to mid-game tower, but falls off in late game due to its small amount of health. And because of that, Golden Ranger is going into A tier. Next is both Golden Mine Layer and Golden Juggernaut. I am ranking both of these at the same time because they are just like their normal versions, just more damage and DPS. I know they have an ability that the normal version doesn't, but that is a story for a different video. Long story short, they both go into S tier. Next up is Warship. Now I know that just by looking at it, I think you know where I'm putting it. So to save some time, I'm just going to tell you that it's an S tier tower. Next is Cryo Ranger. Now I've never really used this tower after its event was over, and I don't blame myself. Me personally, I've never really liked this tower because it's just a copy and paste of Ranger that just freezes enemies. So Cryo Ranger is the only E tier tower. Sorry to any Cryo Ranger fans out there. Next is Commander. Commander is a support tower that buffs towers' range and damage. Commander himself also has a lot of range, and that can also be buffed by EDJ. This makes Commander a S tier tower. And last but not least is Zed. Now Zed recently got nerfed pretty hard, but is still an amazing tower. It's amazing against hordes, but struggles against bosses. Overall, Zed is going into A tier. Now that concludes my tier list. If you made it this far and enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to, as this video took forever to make. Also, feel free to comment your thoughts on my tier list. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye.